It appeared to mark the conclusion of something. 70 acres of stagnant, pale water lay still under a January sky, as if the very earth had surrendered. What had been fertile fields in rural Mercer County, Ohio, were submerged under 2 to 3 feet of murky, copper-hued water. Decaying fence posts tilted at precarious angles. An antiquated, rust-covered cultivator lay half-submerged in a muddy embankment. Fallen cottonwood trees obstructed the drainage channel, their root systems exposed to the sky like balled fists that had lost a protracted struggle. The profound silence was the kind typically found in places long abandoned, to the point where even the birds had departed. A county soil surveyor who happened to pass by that January later remarked that he had encountered reclaimed swampland with brighter prospects. Yet, on a crisp February morning, a 58-year-old man named Harland Briggs stood at the edge of this very field, clad in rubber boots and a canvas coat, clutching a rolled soil map in one hand and a thermos of coffee in the other. He meticulously surveyed the perimeter. He knelt by the water's edge. He pressed his fingers into the mud. He observed details that others had overlooked. Subsequently, he submitted an offer. His neighbors were convinced he had lost his faculties. The county extension office subtly advised against the acquisition. 2 seasoned farmers unequivocally deemed it financial ruin. The prior proprietor had relinquished the land after enduring 3 consecutive years of inundation. A governmental acquisition program had dismissed the parcel as not warranting the administrative expenditure. Nevertheless, Harland proceeded with the purchase. 2 years later, the transformation of those 70 acres astonished county officials mid-sentence, drew agricultural researchers to his property line with notepads and cameras, and subtly reshaped how an entire region perceived the meaning of worthless land. If you appreciate narratives of ordinary individuals accomplishing extraordinary feats, please subscribe and enable notifications to ensure you never miss an installment. Additionally, share in the comments where you are viewing from. These stories resonate far beyond expectations, and we would be delighted to know your location. Harland Briggs had dedicated 31 years to serving as a civil engineer for the Ohio Department of Transportation. His responsibilities included designing culverts, overseeing stormwater management systems, and acquiring decades of expertise in understanding water's movement across terrain, its accumulation points, its flow paths, and methods for its redirection. He was not a farmer by profession. He had never raised livestock, cultivated cash crops, or harvested a single bale of hay in his lifetime. What he possessed was a practical comprehension of hydrology, something rarely acquired by farmers, and a retirement that felt more hollow than anticipated. His wife, Donna, had passed away 18 months prior to the acquisition. Ovarian cancer, progressing from diagnosis to funeral in 41 days. It's the kind of loss that doesn't merely take a person. It fundamentally alters the structure of your daily existence. Harland spent the ensuing year feeling adrift in their home in Findlay, engrossed in reading every available book on regenerative agriculture that he could procure online. Donna had been raised on her family's farm in Crawford County. She often recounted how her grandfather's most astute investment was in land that everyone else considered irrevocably damaged. Harland had pondered this sentiment for a considerable period. When he encountered the listing, 70 acres, severely impacted by flooding, priced accordingly, he didn't perceive a disaster. He saw a drainage challenge, and drainage issues were, in his estimation, engineering problems. Engineering problems, by their nature, had solutions. He dedicated 6 weeks prior to the purchase to undertaking the kind of thorough investigation that defines an engineer. He consulted USDA web soil survey data, reviewed FEMA floodplain maps, and traversed the field boundaries on 3 separate occasions. He reached out to a retired NRCS conservation officer named Earl Detmer, who graciously agreed to examine the parcel with him over coffee and affirmed what Harland had already suspected. Earl informed him that the underlying soil was a Class B silt loam, among the most fertile earth in the county, but it had been submerged for so long that its potential had been forgotten by the populace. The flooding was no enigma to anyone in the county. It was a familiar narrative. The property was situated at the lowest point of a natural drainage basin. Decades earlier, a farmer upstream had permitted beaver activity to obstruct the primary outlet tile. Over time, the tile system beneath the field, installed in the 1970s, had deteriorated in two critical sections. A county drainage initiative in the late 1990s had completely bypassed this particular parcel. 3 consecutive wet years, from 2019 to 2021, had saturated the soil profile to such an extent that the land ceased to drain, even during periods of dry weather. When Harland informed his neighbor, Cleet Ferris, who farmed 400 acres of corn and soybeans in the vicinity, of his intentions, Cleet was forthright. "Harlan, I've witnessed 3 different families attempt to derive value from that land. The water invariably prevails. You will expend resources and ultimately depart, just as they did." The county engineer, a man of measured disposition named Dennis Hofstede, offered a more diplomatic yet essentially similar assessment. The infrastructure expenditures alone, new tile, outlet structures, equipment access, you would be facing substantial costs before you could cultivate a single blade of grass. Harland listened intently to each objection, meticulously documenting them, and then utilized them to formulate his strategy. What Harland had discerned, and what no one else had bothered to quantify, was that the persistent flooding, paradoxically, represented an advantage he could leverage. He wasn't contemplating conventional row crops. He had no intention of battling the prevailing water table. Instead, he planned to re-engineer the landscape to harmonize with it. His approach was grounded in a concept gaining momentum in agricultural circles: integrated wetland pasture systems. The strategy involved accepting that portions of the land would perpetually remain saturated. These areas would be restored as riparian buffer zones, while drainage enhancements would be concentrated on the higher elevations where the soil was genuinely salvageable. In April of the first year, he engaged an excavator operator named Tim Yoakum. For 3 weeks, they worked together installing 1,800 linear feet of new 4-inch drainage tile in the field's upper third, connecting it to an outlet culvert that Harland had personally obtained permits for and engineered, thereby significantly reducing contractor expenses. They reshaped 2 surface swales to channel overflow water towards a central, low-lying basin, preventing it from inundating the entire field. The lower 18 acres, those sections destined to hold water seasonally, were designated by Harland as a managed wetland. He enrolled in a USDA Wetland Reserve Easement Program, which provided cost-share funding for wetland restoration plantings and generated a modest annual payment for maintaining the area's ecological integrity. This was an approach no one had previously considered. By the end of May, the upper acreage began to drain. The change was not dramatic. Water rarely makes a spectacle of itself, but Harland walked the field after 2 inches of rain and observed the surface clarity within 36 hours. He stood there for a prolonged period in silent contemplation. Earl Detmer, who had arrived to inspect the outlet structure, noted a perceptible shift in Harland's demeanor. "That's the look," Earl remarked, "of a man who was proven correct." The initial crop Harland introduced to the reclaimed land was not corn or soybeans. It was a cover crop mixture comprising crimson clover, tillage radish, and winter rye, sown in June onto soil that had been incapable of supporting vegetation for years. The objective was not immediate financial gain, but the revitalization of the soil's biological health. Compacted anaerobic soil that has been flooded for extended periods is, in essence, inert. One does not plant profitable crops into dead soil. One nourishes it first. By August, the field exhibited signs of verdant growth. Cleet Ferris demonstrably reduced his speed twice while driving past. That autumn, Harland employed no-till methods to seed a grass-legume pasture mix into the recovering ground, including orchard grass, tall fescue, and red clover. He erected new woven wire fencing around the perimeter and partitioned the usable acreage into 5 rotational grazing paddocks. Then, the following March, 16 months after acquiring the property, he introduced 22 cow-calf pairs purchased from a producer in an adjacent county who was retiring. Meanwhile, the managed wetland section was yielding unexpected benefits. Migratory waterfowl discovered it by October. A wood duck box program, which Harland had installed along the wetland's edge in collaboration with the County Conservation District, successfully attracted breeding pairs the subsequent spring. A biology teacher from the local high school contacted him, inquiring about student visits. Harland readily agreed. Subsequently, the county made contact. In August of the second year, during one of the most severe storm events Mercer County had experienced in over a decade, a remarkable occurrence took place. A slow-moving weather system deposited nearly 6 inches of rain over a 48-hour period. Properties across the region experienced flooding, roads were washed out, and crops were submerged in fields that had reliably drained for 30 years. Harland's pastures, however, remained intact. More significantly, his wetland basin, now functioning as a meticulously designed water retention system, absorbed runoff from nearly 200 upstream acres and gradually released it through the controlled outlet structure, thereby averting what the county drainage superintendent later described as a substantial surge event that would have inundated Cleet Ferris's lower fields. Cleet's corn crop was consequently saved. When Dennis Hofstedt, the same county engineer who had previously discouraged the purchase, submitted his storm drainage report to the county commissioners, he included a section dedicated to Harland's property, featuring a statement that circulated quietly among agricultural professionals in the region. The integrated wetland pasture restoration on this parcel served as a natural detention basin and likely prevented downstream crop losses estimated to exceed $40,000 during the August event. The Ohio State University Extension Office formally requested a field day. 41 farmers attended. Cleet Ferris visited on a Thursday evening in September. He leaned against Harland's fence, gazing out at the pasture. It was a scene of vibrant green, grazed evenly, with the cattle resting peacefully in the fading light. Beyond them, the wetland shimmered. A great blue heron stood at the shallow edge, as if it were the rightful proprietor. "I'm not going to say I was mistaken," Cleet conceded. Harland regarded him. "All right, but I'm also not going to claim I was right." Harland offered him a cup of coffee from the thermos he habitually carried. George Washington Carver once articulated, "When you can perform the ordinary tasks of life in an extraordinary manner, you will capture the world's attention." Harland had not embarked on this endeavor with the intention of commanding anyone's focus. His objective was to resolve a drainage problem on land that evoked a sentiment his wife had held dear, that damaged things are rarely as irredeemably broken as they appear. What he constructed was not a miracle. It was the product of 6 weeks of diligent research before expending a single dollar, the invaluable insight of a conservation officer who recalled the soil's former potential, an engineer's innate understanding of water's natural inclination, and 2 years of unwavering dedication. The land that an entire county had written off has now become a flourishing cattle operation, a vital wildlife habitat, a protective storm buffer for its neighbors, and an accessible outdoor classroom for students who have never before experienced direct contact with soil. The true lesson transcends mere farming techniques. It lies in the capacity to perceive value in something that everyone else has abandoned. Most individuals saw a waterlogged field. Harland perceived a drainage challenge, a biological puzzle, and a land management problem. Three distinct issues that he possessed the knowledge to address. The opportunity had never been concealed. It was merely awaiting someone willing to invest the necessary observation to comprehend its potential.